Good afternoon and welcome to the Culture Lunch. I am Chicago Tribune entertainment reporter Mark Caro, filling the seat again this week for Chris Jones, who's on vacation. And I'm here at the lunch counter with Nina Metz, our entertainment reporter, and Scott Powers, entertainment editor of the Chicago Tribune. And we have a bunch of topics on here. So first we're going to start with one that's kind of heavy a little bit. Scott Simon from NPR's Weekend Edition Saturday tweeted all weekend from his mother's deathbed, and he has something like 1.2 million followers, and they were treated as a sort of dramatic account of him sitting in a Chicago hospital room with his mother. And it's bringing up it's connecting with people in a very emotional way, which we don't really associate with social media.
And it's important to notice that they were here in Chicago.
Yeah, they're
His
in
mother
Chicago.
lives in Chicago.
Yeah, he's from Chicago originally.
So that's where they were.
So Peter Sagal, who's on NPR, Wait, Don't Tell Me, he said, in the paper, in a story today, we only usually get to see moments like this in fiction, right? It sounds awful exploitative and weird, but when you look at the feed, it's not. And people were very moved by this.
Right. It was wry. It was, he sort of saw the absurdity of certain things. I mean, it wasn't maudlin necessarily, don't you think? I mean, I think that's why people were compelled. He was really able to sort of succinctly, down in 140 characters, kind of capture a moment. He's very close with his mother, and they seem to have a similar sense of humor. And
he's someone who's been very personal on the air, talking about his mother over the years, appearing on things with her over the years. Scott, what was your reaction to it?
I felt it was very well handled for what it was. I think those kinds of things are very personal choices. That's not a personal choice that I would make as an individual, but given the fact that he did it and how he did it, I thought it was remarkable. I don't know if folks have had a chance to see the print edition of the paper today, but we handled it in a very different way as well in terms of just redoing his entire Twitter feed, or at least a lot of that.
Right.
And if you see that kind of in more of a stagnant way, it was quite remarkable and quite moving. And I mean, Twitter has been a real interesting phenomenon over the last few weeks, with Anthony Weiner on one hand and this on the other hand. So it's been
his mother has
remarkable.
since died.
Right.
And he tweeted this morning something that I thought sort of captured some of the humor. He said, but as my mother said, the nice thing about being a Chicagoan is that she'll continue to be able to vote on Election Day. So, he's obviously going through a great deal of pain at the moment, but also grappling with sort of...
Yeah, it brings up a lot of interesting issues, because for me, like, my reaction to it when I first saw it and heard about it was, I have a sort of an allergic reaction to oversharing on social media. And I think, the idea of sort of sitting there with your phone, tweeting while your mom is there, it just felt like an invasion of privacy. And I mean, she's participated with him for various things, and he wasn't sharing like some of the really horrible sort of details, where if you're sitting on someone's deathbed, there's a lot of stuff that you could write. Right. But they do sort of crafting that in a live way. I had a sort of initial like, it's too much for me. But it is done in a, seems like a sincere way, and obviously people connect to it.
Well, and she was an active participant in it too, which to me means a lot. I mean, if the person you're doing it with understands what's going on, and I'm sure she did, then I'm a little less freaked out by it.
Well, and it gets to this other cultural thing, which is that we don't talk in this culture a lot about death. And we don't, and the fact that it's something that everyone goes through, and losing a parent is certainly a rite of passage. The idea of being able to share that with people, I think that it's interesting that in these 140 character tweets, it's enabling people to say, oh, I feel connected more to this life-changing event.
Mm-hmm.
140 characters. I'm looking at two writers, about 140 characters.
Stop.
Yeah.
The one thing I did want to mention is that Robert Falls, who's the artistic director at the Goodman Theater, very accomplished theater director, was at the same hospital with his mother, the same ICU unit. His mother passed away over the weekend, and he and Scott Simon were sort of tweeting back and forth. We're sort of following each other's. I thought it was a very touching sort of sense of brothers in arms, and that they were sort of going through the same emotions at that moment, and ironically. So. Yeah,
it's a fine line, because if everyone starts tweeting this sort of thing, it could be really, but I think that this was, it hits. Anyway, moving on to our next topic. Anniversaries. They're everywhere. Every time you look around, you hear about some other anniversary. American Graffiti, 40th anniversary. Madonna's debut album, 30th anniversary. Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream, 20th anniversary. I just got an email today for In Utero, the Nirvana album is having its 20th anniversary. Rolling Stone tweeted Monday, Coming to America premiered 25 years ago today. Wow, you know, that was like a milestone for me. What's with all the anniversaries? Scott, are these meaningful, or is this just kind of trolling for nostalgia?
I think it's trolling for nostalgia 100%. There are only a few anniversaries that could come close to mattering. I think 5 years is an interesting one, 25 years is an interesting one, 50 is another kind of, I think, touchstone that you want to deal with, maybe 75, and of course 100.
Why 5 years?
Because I think enough time has passed where you can revisit something in a cogent way that adds some value to it.
But not 10?
Well, how often are you going to do it? I mean,
Well, if you don't do 5,
yeah,
maybe 10's more interesting than
but people
5.
do tend to forget. I just think that it's a lazy inroad to a story more times than not. And
well, I
so,
think, you know, from some perspectives, it's somebody, whether it's one of us in the media or it's an actual sort of company that owns this property, they're looking for an in. They're looking for some hook to grab someone's attention. There's so
Right.
much stuff out there. So if you can at least say, well, it's the anniversary of such and such, right? So, I mean, I don't know if it's the lazy as the desperate need to sort of like get to stand out, right?
well, certainly there's a commercial aspect to it, but I'm talking more journalistically. I think you really need to focus in on a little bit more on what's happening now, and something happening 13 years ago isn't necessarily happening now. It's all seems very arbitrary to me sometimes. But I'm guilty of it too.
But I seem to recall you were the editor on a piece I wrote a few weeks ago about Liz Phair.
I was.
The 20th anniversary of Exile in Guyville, and that was my idea, so I was trolling for nostalgia there.
Right.
But the reason for it is because I was like, holy moly, I can't believe that album is
Right.
20 years old.
Right.
And I was also thinking about how, they're really sort of, there are sort of reverberations of that album now. Like you watch the TV show Girls, and you think, well, there's some of the attitude is sort of similar. And so I thought I think it's useful to be able to look back.
I was going to say, you did it as an oral history. So that's always interesting sometimes to get the backstory of how something came together, which is what Rolling Stone has just done with Madonna's debut album. They do the whole
Right.
backstory of like this very sort of like fame-hungry young woman sort of coming in and launching her first album, it's always an interesting read, I think.
Right. And sometimes some people will say things 10 years down the road that they wouldn't say
Right.
10 minutes down the road. So you do kind of sometimes get a more accurate picture of what happened.
Right. Speaking of Coming to America and Eddie Murphy, there's also just a report that there's going to maybe be a Beverly Hills Cop 4. Now, I know you've been waiting for Beverly Hills Cop 4 since that awful Beverly Hills Cop 3 came out in 1994. The original Beverly Hills Cop was 1984. Quickly.
Well, there's a backstory to this. What happened was a TV network was making Beverly Hills Cop as a TV series. Didn't
Right.
get picked up.
Eddie Murphy was gonna make a
gonna be
cameo in that.
That's right. But for some reason, sort of interest in making this as a TV series somehow sparked the studio to say, oh, well, let's maybe revisit it for movies. I mean, John Landis has an interview where he talks about how the original script for Beverly Hills Cop was terrible, it was dreadful, and that Eddie Murphy just did Eddie Murphy. You know what I mean? He just riffed and played. He was able to do that 30 some odd years ago. Would he do that today? Is he as loose? Is he as, I don't know. I mean, he's sort of notorious for having a lot of sort of ego issues cloud his interactions with people in the years since, so I don't know.
Dreamgirls didn't really change his career that much, I guess.
No, it didn't.
And Scott, I could see on the look of your face that you're thinking, wow, Beverly Hills Cop 4, I just can't wait.
I
Because
can't
wanna
wait
hear-
to see
I
it.
want
I
to hear
wanna-
the new
I wanna-
EDM version of Axel's theme.
That's right. And I hope it's 3D in IMAX theaters.
All right.
Pay even more for it.
So this weekend, the big event, Lollapalooza. You can't hear enough about Lollapalooza, can you? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but we're going to talk specifically about the behavior, because you go there and you're going to encounter a lot of different kinds of behavior there. And Chris Borelli actually wrote an excellent piece. I urge you to seek it out online if you don't have Sunday's paper, about people talking during concerts. And obviously people talk during festival concerts. But at what point, I think that this is the thing, when you're going to something like Lollapalooza, at what point do you say, I'm going to let it slide, and what point do you object? So let's just run through a few of these real quick. Someone's talking behind you during a set. let it slide, or do you say something, Scott?
Well, I think almost every answer I'm going to give you is let it slide, because when you're at a festival, you're there for the community. You're not there necessarily as much for the music. So I think on almost every occasion, you're going to have to let it slide. And thankfully, or not thankfully, at Lollapalooza, it's so loud that you can kind of gravitate towards the volume level that you want in terms of moving back or moving ahead.
Nina Metz, you're at Lollapalooza, which I know you're going to be right up front for Phoenix for, or Mumford & Sons, or The Cure, or just at any sort of general admission thing. Someone walks right in front of you and stands there, blocks your view. Object or let it slide?
If they blocked my view,
Yeah.
I would probably walk somewhere else to get a better view.
You don't
I don't
say,
know that
hey,
that's a bit.
move, you jerk. You just
If
walk
you're at
right in front of
like
you?
an outdoor festival
Yeah.
thing, I don't.
Someone just
no,
walks
it's-
right in front of you?
That happens all the. When was the last time you went to? That happens all
I know
the
it
time.
does, but I try to sort of passive aggressive my way into it. Like elbows get a little sharp, or maybe it's a little too much, a little too close. So if someone walks right in front of you, like when you're in a crowd after everyone's sort of packed in.
Yeah, but
That's
people are
rude.
always moving around. No one's ever staying still for the whole time. And also, you have to sort of weigh, like, how badly do I want to get into a confrontation with someone? You know what I mean?
It's
So-
like they're bigger. Well, if they're bigger than me, they're more likely to be in front of me. But they're also makes it less likely that I want to confront them.
All right, I have a question. How do you
Yeah.
guys feel about people talking, like, at sports events, like at baseball games or basketball? Because I do it all the time. And I
Oh,
wonder,
it's
like...
sports. That's okay. I mean, but tennis, no. Golf, no.
Right.
Isn't that funny?
Well, actually, golf you can, just not when they're taking the shot.
Well, exactly.
Right.
But-
You're there for a different experience.
All right. What if someone's like standing there with their phone, like, and then we'll get off this topic. But what if someone's standing there with their phone the whole time, videotaping, like right in front of you, and you're watching, spinning the phone? You just move.
Yep.
So you never. What would cause you to object? Where do you say, okay, this is enough?
Somebody hits me, basically.
Don't hit Scott Powers.
don't hit
at
me.
Lollapalooza
And I'll be
this
there
weekend
all
because
3 days, so
he's
don't
got
hit
this
me.
sort of Hulk thing that
Yeah,
goes on.
yeah, I turned
and
I mean,
green.
the
I've
stuff
seen
that
it.
becomes, like, I think problematic is when people get drunk and they're not sort of aware of their surroundings, and so they sort of bash into you or, keep step-backing into you. Like, I've been at concerts where a person, they just keep stepping, they don't realize it, but they keep backing up, and there is that kind of like, come on.
I mean, Scott, you have a basic survival strategy for Lollapalooza. Tell our viewers what it is.
Well, first of all, the most important thing is you bring a baggie for your iPhone, because when it rains, your iPhone gets ruined. So that's one of the first things you do. Bring rain gear. I tend to kind of seek out different shows. I think the early portion of the day is much more interesting than the later portion of the day. The late portion of the day, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a brand name band that's doing their usual set, or at least a portion of it. But early in the day, you're going to get surprised. And a plug for Greg Kott's Friday Guide to Lollapalooza. I think what he does is he goes through every band and tells you which to see and which to not see, perhaps. And then he has got great don't misses, and I usually tend to seek those out and go to those stages where he said, you're going to like this band because of XYZ reason.
All right. And if you're not doing Lollapalooza, it's almost the end of the summer, even though it's not quite August, but it feels like it. It's kind of winding down. Nina, what would you say for someone should do this before the end of the summer?
Okay, well, so I cover theater quite a bit, so I have two quick things to say. We were talking about anniversaries. It is going to be the 55th anniversary of The Birds, the Hitchcock film.
55th.
Correct. It's an anniversary.
That's a big one for Scott.
So there is a theater company in town, Helen Handbag, which has done a parody of The Birds. Helen Handbag does incredible drag performances. And so Tippi Hedren has come to Chicago in the past to see the show.